This tutorial is about spinal segmentation, and you're probably familiar with this movement. Maybe you know it as cat-cow or cat-camel. However, I want us to really focus on the details of how we're moving through each vertebrae. So instead of just going into these motions without really thinking about what's happening in our spine, I want you to dive in deep internally and really start to understand how your spine moves. When we start, the spine might feel pretty sticky and we might be moving our spine in a lot of chunks along the way. We're trying to isolate this down so that we can move one vertebrae at a time. So if you think of a long chain link, if you hold that chain link, you should be able to move it or wiggle it, and each link would move independently. However, maybe it got rusted over time in certain sections, and all those parts are starting to move as one big chunk. So we are going to try to break that rust apart, so to say, and start to create more fluidity in the movement of our vertebrae, creating more strength around our spine, using our abdominals, of course, and all the tissues surrounding that. So let's find our way onto our hands and knees. If hands and knees are not comfortable for you, feel free to come down onto your elbows. Remember, the focus here is in the spine. Find what feels like a neutral spine for you, and that means as flat or as long of a spine as you can make it. I want you to do your best to keep your shoulders stacked over your wrists and your hips over your knees, but you can have a little variance in that as well. Let's begin at the tip of the tailbone. I want you to start to lift your sits bones up towards the ceiling. And so your tailbone is going to be pointing up towards the ceiling. Now you can probably already start to feel the spine dip down towards the floor, coming into like a U shape. Keep going, nice and slow, until you feel your chest start to dip down towards the floor. And then you might feel like you're a little bit stuck. Pull the shoulders back towards your hips and then gaze forward down the bridge of your nose. No need to lift and crank the head up too much here. So now let's say that this is your deepest expression for your cow pose. Let's take ourselves into our cat pose now. So the opposite, like making the shape of a rainbow. Beginning at the tailbone, start to tuck the tailbone under. Now, when you do this, try not to move anything in the upper back. Keep the upper back in your deepest cow pose. So we're pulling, using our sits bones, using our glutes, using the abdominals to try to curve down the tailbone and pull the lumbar spine into as much flexion as we possibly can. Keep going very slowly, and you'll feel it start to creep into the mid-back, and then finally into the upper back, moving as slow as you can until you're pressing your hands and tucking your chin. Now we're in our deepest cat pose. So this is our deepest amount of flexion in our entire spine. From here, we're going to start to take ourselves into the deepest amount of extension. So that was back at our cow pose. Now the challenge is hold your spine in this position and just move from the tailbone first. So start to lift that tailbone up. You'll feel the pelvic tilt come into the low back. That lumbar starts to come into more of its natural positioning. Keep moving slowly. Try to keep the thoracic spine, that's the upper back, in that position until you just can't anymore. And the spine comes all the way through, and we end by lifting the chin and gazing forward into our deepest extension. Hold here. Pull the shoulders down. Okay, let's reverse this again. Start from the tailbone. Tuck the tailbone under. Feel the belly pull in to help you as we slowly move. And when you notice a spot that moves in a bigger section or a bigger chunk, it happens for me too, pause there and see if you can recruit a little bit more engagement to slowly help you come into that deepest flexion that you possibly can. Hold here. You know where we're going. We're going back into extension. Start by lifting that tailbone, the sits bones up. When you feel a huge section or a big section start to move all together, pause.
slow it down a little bit more and do your best to try to make your way through.
Don't worry if you're making noises. Grunt along with me. Okay, we've got one more. Let's try this. We're in that deepest extension. Let's take ourselves into that flexion, tuck the tailbone under. Focus on each section for yourself, finding a bit more recruitment, a bit more segmentation of the spine. Push
Into the deepest cat pose. And then coming into your neutral spine.
Cat cows will never feel the same again once you start doing them with this much intention. It can be so helpful if you can find a partner or buddy to use their fingers to walk along your spine so that you can start to really pinpoint the areas that you're not feeling on your own, so you can get a little bit of that touch to help you feel those areas. But I want you to spend some time doing cat cows every day. If you can spend about 3, maybe 5 minutes. And we already did that today just by doing 3 sets of our cat cows, just with that real intent and that deep focus. And you'll start to build some strength there and see a difference in how your body's feeling.